We have a member of our community on today's episode. We're going to call her Melinda. You can find all of the episodes transcribed on my website, btr.org. You can comment there and join the conversation. She commented on one of my podcast episodes talking about Codependents Anonymous, whether or not she should go, because the therapist had told her that she's codependent. If they called you codependent, maybe that label is protecting your husband and not you. If your husband lied and cheated and they told you that you had your own work to do, you're not codependent. You're responding in a healthy way to emotional abuse. But here's the truth. In sex addiction therapy or other types of addiction therapy, a therapist might tell your husband that you're codependent, which is actually a form of victim blaming. The problem, it shifts the responsibility of his lying onto her when there's nothing she could have done to stop it. She might be told her childhood wounds or her neediness or whatever was part of the problem when that's absolutely not true. Men who betray their wives find this language to be very useful. If you're codependent, then you share the blame. And then you end up working on yourself while he keeps lying. But women already blame themselves enough. They need to be told that they're brave and they're strong, and they didn't deserve that. So now Melinda is going to share her experience with this. Welcome, Melinda.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
How did your husband weaponize codependency language?
My husband revealed that he had been having an affair and later on revealed that he had been seeing a sex massage and also abusing porn. And we entered into a process of trying to figure out what was going on. I understood that it was not my fault and that it was something that I felt like we can overcome together. He struggled a lot with all of it and ultimately showed that he couldn't meet me where I needed to be met so that I can recover from the betrayal. But for a period of time, he entered into 12-step, and he also actually, I should say, has been trained as a counselor. And when we entered into therapy after the revelations of his betrayal, something kept coming up that was baffling to me. And it was reinforced by our therapist that somehow there was something in our dynamic that I was responsible for. That's why he did what he did and was acting out in the way he was. I was trying to wrap my head around it because I'm a person who takes a lot of responsibility for her own behavior and her own actions, but I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. I also have done a lot of work professionally understanding trauma. So I was already under a trauma orientation thinking, I'm traumatized. Why am I not getting understood here? Why does it keep coming back to something in my psychological makeup that's creating this dynamic of his acting out behavior?
Essentially, it was trying to get you to take some form of accountability for the situation.
Yes. And later I kind of understood where this is coming from when I started learning more about 12-step and codependency and what that means, how therapists and some in the 12-step field think about codependency, that I realized a lot of that thinking was damaging to me and neglected that his acting out was really, I've heard you use the term abuse, and I don't know if I want to use that term, but it was definitely abusive. And a lot of his behavior, aside from the sexual acting out, was passive aggressive, covert abuse.
Emotional abuse in the form of lies and manipulation.
Yeah, and a very charming facade and playful facade. A lot of it was very gaslighty as well. What I realized is that codependency was a really great excuse for him to not take responsibility. We had problems prior to this throughout our relationship, and the problems, in my view, were him not taking accountability for behavior and responsibilities. And when the word codependency or the concept of codependency came into our relationship, it just became another tool to gaslight me and deflect. And it was really confusing for a while because I am a person who wants to take accountability, but he was using it as a way to not actually address the harm he had caused.
There's that, and then it goes further than that because he's not just using it to avoid taking accountability for the harm that he's caused. He's also using it to try and pin it on you. And that's why I call that abuse, because he is actively trying to harm you.
Yes, yes.
I mean, he doesn't see it that way. He just thinks he's trying to get away with it, but that is the end result. The end result is that he's harming you even further by lying about your part.
Yeah, I became a scapegoat for many, many things, and this just allowed even more scapegoating. His decisions to cheat and all the other stuff was part of that scapegoating. I didn't quite understand why this was happening. I was reading a lot of books on like how to help your partner heal and what does reconciliation look like, and I was bringing them to him, and he kept coming up with, why don't you focus on yourself? And I'm thinking, I'm focusing on what I need to allow you back into my life. And anytime I said, your defensiveness is really hurting me and I don't trust you, you're not doing trustworthy things. And he said, well, stop focusing on me and focus on yourself. It didn't make sense to me until I started looking into what kind of codependency tells people. It tells them to focus on themselves and not on others, which sounds great, but in the hands of, I think, an abusive and exploitative person, it can really go awry.
Well, and also it's what they want you to do. They would like you to stop confronting them about their abusive behaviors. And so because that's what they want you to quote unquote work on yourself, which to them means leave me alone.
And a lot of this is about thinking that you're controlling. And my orientation, philosophical and spiritual frame, I have a Christian background, but I have a more alignment with Buddhist mindfulness practices, as well as I've become more of a feminist, think about feminist psychology a lot more. I look at it in that frame, and I see a lot of women being held responsible for men's behavior in the culture. And I think that was just a natural extension of the woman is making me do this, or even he intimated that the affair partner was the aggressor in this situation, and that somehow she was this temptress.
What could I do? She kissed me. I couldn't do anything about it, right?
So I'm always aware of that dynamic, of the gender dynamic. And our therapist played along with it. She was a new therapist. So that was sort of like the double trauma of facing the reality of his infidelity and all of that, and then a therapist reflecting it back on me in our supposedly safe setting.
It sounds like the therapist sort of became an extension of the abuse. So let's go back to where you're being supportive of his recovery. Did you ever attend 12-step or COSA, which is co-sex addicts? Did you ever attend either of those groups?
I did. What was striking to me, I felt so I had to align with being codependent the few times that I went. For instance, there's one woman who was agonizing over her partner who was holed up in the basement with the computer looking at porn, and he wouldn't leave the house. And I hear her describing the story. And instead of her saying how angry and being indignant about how wrong that was and how inappropriate that was, she went back to, well, I'm just going to focus on myself, take care of myself. And I thought, are you allowing abuse in your home because it's easier, because you don't know how to set the boundary or even draw a line? I just felt like she just caved into feeling like she's beholden to the situation and must allow it to continue.
I think that happens a lot. Women don't know what to do, and confronting it seems so difficult. And also, the consequences of confronting it seems so difficult. Like, I can't do that. And so, I'll just focus on myself becomes a way for them to do something. I feel a lot of compassion in this stage for victims because it's difficult to know what to do living with an abuser or divorcing an abuser. Both choices are not good. The best choice is if you could have him not be abusive anymore, which you have no control over. So it's a way that victims try to empower themselves sometimes. And I think that all of us go through a stage like that. We can hold a space of compassion for ourselves when we were in that stage and others in that stage as they work through exactly what they need to feel safe, because it takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly had to accept where he was in his path and that it was not in alignment with where I wanted to be. So that definitely took time. Just really allowing myself to feel how terrible the codependency situation was. And that allowed me to move forward. Realizing that I was not the kind of person who was going to say, well, I'm going to focus on making myself happy and let him have his life in our home and our relationship. That wasn't going to work for me. I could not abide by being in a relationship with a person who was really taking advantage of the situation, taking advantage of my compassion, my understanding, and really not supporting me and being a fair partner. And so that's why I bring up thinking about gender and are women being encouraged to look the other way and take responsibility for men's bad behavior. Just the message that we have to even help take care of them. And I think that can easily become exploited.
Absolutely. With this concept of codependency, in your experience with therapists, how did codependency cause therapy induced trauma? Let's talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, we had worked with mostly traditional therapists, marriage and family therapists.
A lot of the sex addiction therapists, they claim to know about betrayal trauma, but they don't actually practice it. They just do codependency and call it betrayal trauma. And that is very dangerous. Sex addiction therapists don't really seem to understand it either. The best people seem to be abuse experts from what we've experienced.
The therapist we'd been with for a long time left me with a lot of trauma, and I have a lot of hesitation to even find a new therapist. Codependency, it's a framework that's part of a lot of therapy training, that it's a dance, that you have a relationship dance and you each have a part and all of your stuff and his stuff. But what our therapists fail to recognize, like you said, abuse and trauma. So fail to understand what abuse looks like, what covert abuse looks like, emotional abuse looks like, that abusers can come into an office and look like the calmest, sweetest, most cooperative people, while you're the partner tearing her hair out and looking like a crazy woman in the office. Then you look like the one who's unhinged and angry. And our therapist did say if it wasn't for your dynamic, he wouldn't have cheated. And I later on realized, no, it has nothing to do with me. I had to realize that it was part of his retaliation for me even having expectations of cooperation and accountability in our relationship. And instead of being cooperative and accountable, he thought, well, she's no good. She's giving me a hard time. Women on Pornhub are better for me.
Right. Which is what abusers want. They would like to manipulate and, I won't say beat down physically, but to the point where they get what they want. That's the point of the abuse. And for therapists not to notice it, it's also really interesting in the like progressive communities, for example. And I tend to live in that world. In an effort to be like politically correct, they end up throwing victims under the bus unknowingly. So you'd think that they would understand abuse, but I have found that neither side understands it. Like conservatives and liberals, neither one of those groups really truly understand abuse.
Yes, I don't think therapists actually understand trauma and how to be trauma informed around betrayal. Our therapist was trained to be even handed. You don't take sides.
Neutrality only serves the perpetrator because neutrality is there's two sides to the story, and both stories are of equal truth. And it serves the perpetrator because if they can say, I did this, but she did this, we have this toxic dance. It's a toxic relationship rather than saying, I'm the abuser. Some go as far to say as I didn't do anything wrong and she's the abuser. So many victims are being accused of abuse themselves, which is also super scary.
Yes, and in fact, in our therapy sessions and even my conversations with my spouse, I said, he betrayed me. I said this to our therapist, he betrayed me. And she said, well, I think you've both betrayed each other. And I thought, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I did not. And I've only have had loyalty and allegiance to our marriage and our family life together. So that was just red meat for him to kind of feed his victimhood.
I'm guessing the abuse got worse.
It just continued. The pattern of blaming me, being covertly abusive, gaslighting and love bombing, and then wondering why I was withdrawn and then blowing up at me for being withdrawn, and just kept continuing. And as I saw this pattern over and over again of I'm holding my boundary, I'm saying very clearly what I need, what I expect, he couldn't get past that, my boundary. He tried love bombing. I love you. I love you. I love you. He tried all kinds of things. He wanted me to let go of what I knew in my heart was needed for us to have a healthy relationship, for me to let go of expectations of him. And by declaring his undying love and very grandiose gestures, and I wasn't going to accept it. I knew in my heart I needed something authentic.
Like one woman, she said, "Okay, I'm going to file for divorce." She filed. He came back and said, "I'll do anything. I'll do anything." And she said, "Okay, these are the things that you need to do." And he didn't do those things, but he would say the right things, right? So you can see very clearly when their actions are not matching their words, that's manipulation. That's grooming. It's love bombing. It's not recovery.
And of course, when I said here love bombing, he said, "How do you judge me? You're judging me." And so I thought, I'm not going to get anywhere because I'm trying to call out and name the things that are not right in this situation, that are not working, with the desire to see things work, not to punish. And that was another accusation that I constantly faced, that I was trying to punish and control and avoid my own problems by naming what was happening.
Well, the weird thing is, one of your own problems was that you were being abused. So you were clearly stating one of your own problems.
Women are using their voice and speaking up, and a lot of our rage and our anger in these situations is that we're tired of being exploited or abused or taken advantage of. We're written off, we're told we're crazy, or we want to control everything. I think that we have to recognize kind of male entitlement in a lot of situations. I think that gets missed when we're just thinking about, well, women is punishing because she can't look at her own stuff, or she's controlling these situations because of her own trauma. And I think so many women out there are pretty self reflective and pretty thoughtful, and women have been working on their own sort of self healing for many, many years. Let's celebrate that and acknowledge that women have evolved a lot of good self care and empowerment, and abusive men need to have a lot more work around how to come along with us. I do think that the codependency model is kind of holding women responsibly for their partner's alcoholism. That's just from another time. And I think women are doing their own healing. They've been doing it for a long time. I think we need to work on abusive men and their entitlement.
I love feminist theory. I'm a happy and unabashed and unapologetic feminist. And I think that radical feminism really is the only way to beat this, by saying my opinions are just as important as yours. What I want in a marriage is just as important. And if what you want is someone who will just be quiet and look the other way, this marriage is not going to work for me. And I, as a woman, have the right to say that. And I have a right to set boundaries around it. And it's okay with me if that's not what you want. And if it's not, then have a nice life. So when I first got married, I really opposed, and I know a lot of listeners aren't, so I do not want to offend anyone right now, but I am extremely opposed to guns and motorcycles. And when I was dating my ex-husband now, I said to him, if you like guns and motorcycles, that is super cool for you, right? Like, I am so happy for you. That's great. I will not date you. So you just do your thing and shine on and live your life. And he told me, I don't ride motorcycles and I don't like guns. I'm not a gun person. And I was like, cool. Well, I found out later that was a complete and total lie and manipulation. So I tried to be really upfront. I was very obvious about it, what I wanted. And he thought that he could gaslight me rather than saying, oh, you know what? I love guns and motorcycles. We're probably not a good fit. Do you know what I mean? So same thing with the pornography. I don't want someone who will cheat and look at porn and lie and manipulate me. So if that's who you are, then shine on. You live your life just far away from me. And I think women are becoming empowered to the point where they can start saying that. The hard thing is when the man looks like that person, when he manipulates you. And now I'm not dating, but if I go on a date, I would actually probably keep my opinions to myself because I don't want him to know what I think. I just want to know what he thinks. So I'd maybe say, how do you feel about guns? Without telling him what I thought, so that I could hear what he thought just without knowing what I thought. Does that make sense? So that I can't be manipulated. So I think my dating strategy will be a lot more cautious and take it a lot slower, and also not put everything out there while I'm getting to know the person, because I don't want them to use it against me or to use it to manipulate me. I'm afraid of being groomed again. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think men in this world have to understand what we've been through and why we may come off as guarded or protective or suspicious. Despite our best intentions to be trusting and open hearted, there's a lot that some of us have been through that makes that very difficult.
Well, and I think we've learned to look for what a trustworthy person looks like. And it takes time. You cannot determine that from a 5-minute conversation or a 10-minute conversation. You can't determine it from 1 2-hour date. It takes years to figure out whether or not someone is a trustworthy person, and experience. So taking our time is important. And had we done that before, we might not have even hit the nail on the head, because we might not have known what we were looking for, but we know better now, which is awesome.
That's a great point. I think that's where I've arrived to really know clearly what I'm about. And when I see something that's disconnected, or when I meet someone who's disconnected from that and isn't compatible, I can see it more clearly. And that helps, I think, that you just know yourself better and can recognize somebody else that might be unhealthy for you. To your point of having the boundaries and being willing to say, this isn't for me. This relationship isn't for me because, you're doing you and it's not working for me. That, I know not all women can do that. I know so many women are in these situations where they're trapped in for whatever reason, and leaving may feel worse than staying if they held their boundary. But for me, I found as I struggled, I know we have 2 children, so leaving took a while, but eventually found the logistical possibilities to make it happen, to have him leave. That's when things really changed. He couldn't hide and manipulate me anymore because he wasn't around. I could stand more firmly, and then he really had to reckon with himself. And so he is reckoning him with himself now. I'm still not sure if that'll bring us back together.
Well, thank you so much, Melinda, for coming on today's podcast. I appreciate you sharing your story. And I just loved the word weaponizing. And so I want everybody to consider, in what ways do certain language, therapy language, hurt abuse victims